What if the one person who was supposed to protect you, the one you loved most, became the reason your sister's wedding turned into chaos? My name is Ava, and this is the story of how family secrets, betrayal, and one dangerous woman nearly tore us apart. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one of family scars, resilience, and the shocking truth about betrayal at the heart of a wedding. If you've ever carried the weight of a broken family, this one will hit close. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so we can keep bringing you more powerful stories just like this. I've always believed that the ocean holds secrets. Living in a small coastal town in North Carolina, the Atlantic has been my constant backdrop. Its rolling waves, its restless tides, its endless rhythm that seemed to mirror the ups and downs of my own life. Some mornings, I'd sit on my porch with a steaming cup of coffee in hand, sketchbook on my lap, and watch the sunrise bleed across the horizon. It was in those moments, with salt in the air and gulls crying overhead, that I reminded myself, you made it, Ava. You carved out a life for yourself. At 32, I was proud to say I'd built something solid from nothing, a freelance graphic design business, born from years of late nights, self-doubt, and an iron will to prove that I wasn't destined to repeat the mistakes of my father. I'd clawed my way out of a turbulent childhood, filled with slammed doors, empty wallets, and the sharp crack of anger hanging in the air. My mom had been the glue back then, her cookies cooling on the counter, her soft words patching over the arguments like gauze over a wound. But my dad was a storm waiting to break. He was a mechanic with grease under his nails and a laugh that once filled a room, but his temper burned quick and hot. After the divorce, when I was barely a teenager, the man I knew unraveled like a frayed rope. The bottle became his companion. Whiskey replacing any trace of the father who once cheered for me at school art fairs. By the time I hit college, he'd lost his auto shop to debt, poor choices, and the poison he poured into his glass. I swore to myself then, I will never let his chaos define me. And for a while, I kept that promise. My little house by the shore, my roster of loyal clients, and my quiet evenings with sketchbooks scattered around me felt like proof I had escaped. I had created a rhythm that was mine. But life has a cruel way of testing the promises you make to yourself. Right now, that test was wrapped up in one word: family. More specifically, in my younger sister, Chloe. She was 27. A third-grade teacher with a heart so big it could swallow the world. Where I had grown wary, Chloe remained hopeful. She believed in people, in goodness, in second chances. And she was about to marry Nate, her high school sweetheart who had become a firefighter. The kind of man who ran into burning buildings while the rest of the world ran out. Chloe had been dreaming of this wedding since she was a child. I remember her sketching dresses in the margins of her notebooks, whispering about fairy tale ceremonies, even while Dad stumbled home reeking of liquor. For her, the wedding wasn't just about love. It was about healing, about stitching together the torn fabric of our family for one perfect day. And I was her maid of honor, which meant the weight of floral arrangements, seating charts, fittings, and pep talks rested squarely on my shoulders. I'd never seen her so nervous, her usually bright spirit fraying like loose threads. And honestly, I wasn't far behind, because hovering over all the joy, like a shadow waiting to fall, was Dad. Ever since the divorce, he had been unpredictable, swinging between brief stretches of sober charm and long nights lost to whiskey and regret. And now, as if fate wasn't already cruel enough, he had a new girlfriend, Vanessa. She'd appeared out of nowhere a year ago, clinging to him like ivy on a crumbling wall. She called herself a real estate agent, but there was something too polished, too sharp, too wrong about her. The way she leaned into Dad's ear at gatherings, the sly glances, the pushy comments about family decisions, it all set my teeth on edge. Chloe noticed it too, though she tried not to dwell on it. One morning, we were at the local flower shop, surrounded by buckets of roses and peonies, when she grabbed my arm, her dark eyes wide with worry.
"Ava, do you think Dad will actually show up sober?" she whispered, her voice small, as if afraid the flowers themselves might overhear. I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and forced a smile I didn't feel. "I hope so, sis. For you, I really do." But in my gut, a knot twisted tight. Hope wasn't enough when it came to Dad. I'd seen too many slurred apologies, too many broken promises to believe otherwise. Chloe deserved better than uncertainty on the most important day of her life. That night, curled on my couch with Micah, my boyfriend, my anchor, I let it all spill. Micah was the opposite of chaos. A software developer with a calm demeanor and a dry humor that steadied me when I felt myself unraveling. She's fake, Micah. Vanessa's smile is fake, her stories are fake, and the way she's got her hooks in Dad makes me sick. I ranted, pacing as he sat patiently with his laptop balanced on his knees. He closed it, set it aside, and reached for my hand. "Ava, you can't control everything. Focus on Chloe. The rest, you'll figure it out." I sighed, sinking next to him, my head against his shoulder. If Dad screws this up, I'll never forgive him. Micah didn't argue. He just nodded, squeezing my hand, though the flicker of worry in his eyes betrayed his calm words. The wedding was a week away, and I felt like I was juggling glass. One wrong move, one crack, and everything would shatter. Dad's half-drunk phone calls didn't help. His slurred reassurances that he'd be on his best behavior. Vanessa's oddly pushy texts about the guest list, as if she had some unspoken authority. I tried to keep the peace, tried to shield Chloe from the storm I felt gathering, but my own patience was running thin. Then Harper, my best friend and a journalist with instincts sharper than a bloodhound's, caught on to my unease. Over coffee at the local diner, she leaned in, stirring her latte slowly. "What's the deal with Vanessa?" she asked, her eyes locked on mine. I lowered my voice, glancing around. "She's too cozy with Dad. I overheard her on the phone. Something about a big deal closing soon. It didn't sound like real estate." Harper's eyebrows shot up. "You think she's playing him?" I shrugged, my stomach churning. "I don't know, but I'm gonna find out." That conversation lit a fire in me. Late nights, I scrolled through Vanessa's glossy social media posts, filtered smiles, vague captions about new ventures. I called a couple of Dad's old buddies, fishing for answers. Nothing concrete, just murmurs of how fast she'd latched onto him, how quickly his money seemed to vanish. The pieces weren't fitting together, but one thing was clear. Vanessa was a ticking bomb, and with the wedding just days away, the clock was running out. I'd promised Chloe our perfect day, but promises, I was starting to learn, are fragile things.
Chloe had always been the dreamer between us. Where I built walls to survive, she built castles in her imagination, paper crowns on her head as she twirled in front of mirrors. Even as kids, when our father's anger stormed through the house, Chloe would clutch her notebook and sketch gowns fit for queens. One day, she'd whisper to me, showing me her pencil drawings of long trains and lace sleeves. "I'll have a wedding where everything is beautiful, where we're all happy." I used to smile at her naivety. Back then, I didn't believe in happy endings, but Chloe, she carried that vision into adulthood, like a lantern against the dark. And now, at 27, she was on the verge of living it. Nate, her fiancé, was as steady as she was hopeful, a firefighter with a grin that could light up a room. He had been Chloe's anchor since high school, the kind of guy who stayed after the final bell to walk her home, who remembered her coffee order when she was buried in grading papers, who drove 3 hours once in a snowstorm just to surprise her with soup when she was sick. They weren't flashy, they weren't dramatic, they were steady, and Chloe needed that. As her maid of honor, I got a front row seat to her excitement and her nerves. The beachfront venue she chose was breathtaking. White tents draped with fairy lights, chairs lined neatly in the sand, the Atlantic shimmering like a blessing in the background. Every time we visited to check on the setup, Chloe's eyes would glisten with that little girl joy I remembered so well. "This is it, Ava," she whispered once, standing barefoot on the sand where her aisle would be. "This is the moment I've been dreaming of."
Her voice cracked with emotion, and I forced a smile, hugging her shoulders. "It's going to be perfect, sis, I promise." But deep down, those words felt like glass in my mouth, because perfection was fragile, and our family had a way of breaking fragile things. The closer the wedding got, the more Chloe's optimism frayed. She'd sit with me on her living room floor, RSVP cards spread out like fallen leaves, her hands trembling as she counted them for the 3rd time. "What if Dad ruins everything?" she whispered one night, her voice small. "I just want one day where we're all happy." Her tears nearly undid me. I pulled her into my arms, stroking her hair like Mom used to do for us. "I've got you, Chloe. Nothing's going to mess this up, I swear." But as I held her, my mind raced, because I couldn't control Dad. I couldn't control Vanessa. And I couldn't control the way a single drunken stumble could unravel everything Chloe had dreamed of. Mike had tried to ground me through it all. His calm was a tether when I felt like I was floating toward chaos. We'd sit on my couch at night, him scrolling through code on his laptop, while I ranted about flower arrangements, guest list drama, and Vanessa's sudden obsession with wedding details. "She texted me again," I muttered once, waving my phone, "asking if the band takes requests. Who even does that when it's not their wedding?" Micah smirked, his eyes still on the screen. "Maybe she wants to make sure they play her theme song." I groaned, collapsing beside him. "Not funny." He set the laptop down and kissed my temple. "You're wound too tight. Focus on Chloe. Vanessa will show her true colors. People like her always do." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But Vanessa was slippery, her smile polished, her presence somehow too much. And Dad? Well, Dad was already halfway gone most nights. Then Harper, my best friend, started circling the situation like the journalist she was. Over greasy fries and endless coffee at the diner, she leaned across the booth. "So what's Vanessa's deal?" she asked, eyes sharp as ever. I lowered my voice. "She's glued to Dad like gum on a shoe." And I overheard her on the phone, talking about some big deal closing. It didn't sound like real estate. Harper's brow furrowed. "You think she's conning him?" I shrugged. "I don't know, but something about her stinks." Harper leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "Then let's find out what." Her words lit a fire in me. That night, long after Micah fell asleep beside me, I scrolled through Vanessa's social media. Photos of expensive dinners, cryptic captions about big opportunities, and a revolving door of hashtags like #BossLife and #RealEstateGoals. None of it felt real. It felt staged, like a glossy mask hiding something rotten. I even reached out to some of Dad's old friends, guys who used to work with him at the garage. They didn't know much, just that Vanessa had him wrapped around her finger and that his savings seemed to be vanishing faster than ever. Still, no smoking gun, just whispers, half-truths, and the gnawing certainty that Vanessa's presence was a ticking bomb. Meanwhile, Chloe was too busy juggling fittings, lesson plans, and last-minute vendor changes to notice the storm clouds gathering. She clung to her dream, to the belief that Dad would show up, sober and proud, walking her down the aisle like she'd always imagined. And maybe for her sake, I wanted to believe it too. But every time my phone lit up with a late-night call from Dad, slurring promises he couldn't keep, my chest tightened. Every time Vanessa's name flashed with another pushy text, my stomach twisted. I was her maid of honor, but more than that, I was her shield. If it came down to it, I would move mountains to protect her happiness, even if it meant standing between her and the people we were supposed to call family.
what I didn't know was just how high that cost would be. Because the closer we got to the wedding day, the more it felt like I was walking a tightrope. One wrong move, one wrong word, and everything Chloe dreamed of could come crashing down. And somewhere deep inside, I felt it. The storm wasn't just coming, it was already here.
There are some wounds that never quite heal, no matter how much time passes. For me, that wound was my father. When I think of him, I remember the smell of engine grease, the scrape of his laugh echoing in the garage, the rare afternoons when he'd take me for ice cream after school and ask about my drawings. But those memories are buried under years of shouting, slammed doors, and the heavy scent of whiskey seeping into the walls. Divorce had cracked him, but the bottle shattered what was left. And now, years later, he still carried that storm with him. Unpredictable, destructive, and impossible to ignore. The closer we got to Chloe's wedding, the more present that shadow became. His phone calls would come late at night, his voice thick and slurred, promising me he'd be there, sober and smiling, ready to give his little girl away. "Ava, don't you worry about me. I'll be on my best behavior. Chloe deserves it. I won't screw this up. Not this time." I'd sit in the dark, phone pressed to my ear, my free hand curled into a fist. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think maybe the man who once carried me on his shoulders at the county fair still existed under the haze of alcohol. But the truth was sharper. Hope was a luxury when it came to my father. And then there was Vanessa.
If Dad was the storm, she was the lightning bolt. Sudden, dazzling, and dangerous. She had appeared in his life about a year ago, striding into our world like she owned it. She called herself a real estate agent, though I had yet to see her sell so much as a garden shed. Everything about her screamed performance. The too tight dresses, the manicured nails tapping on her phone, the syrupy smile that never reached her eyes. Worse than that was how she clung to Dad, whispering in his ear, guiding his decisions like she was the puppeteer and he was the puppet. Watching them together made my stomach churn. It wasn't just about her. It was about the way Dad let her take over. The way he let her become his new compass, even if she was pointing him straight into the ground. I tried to keep Chloe insulated from it. She wanted to believe Dad would come through for her, that he'd put down the bottle and step up for once in his life. She was counting on it like a kid waiting for Santa. And I couldn't take that hope from her, even if I didn't share it. One evening, about 5 days before the wedding, Chloe and I were at her place, buried under stacks of RSVP cards and ribbon swatches. She was exhausted, her hair falling loose from its bun, her hands trembling slightly as she checked the guest list. She looked up suddenly, her eyes glassy. "Do you think Dad will actually do it? Will he show up sober?" The crack in her voice gutted me. She'd always been the hopeful one, the forgiving one. To hear doubt in her voice felt like watching her heart splinter. I forced a smile, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "He loves you, Chloe. And if there's ever a day he's going to get it together, it's this one." She nodded slowly, but I could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe it either. Later that night, I vented to Micah again. He listened the way he always did, with quiet patience, letting me pour out every jagged thought until I was empty. "I swear, if Vanessa ruins Chloe's wedding, I'll never forgive her," I muttered, pacing the living room. Micah set his phone aside, leaning back against the couch. "Ava, you can't control what your dad does. You can't control her either. All you can do is protect Chloe as best you can." I promised her, I whispered, more to myself than him. I promised I'd make sure it was perfect. He crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. "Then you'll do everything you can. That's all anyone can ask." But I wasn't satisfied with that. Everything I can meant digging. It meant watching Vanessa's every move, listening for cracks in her stories, pulling at threads until something unraveled. And slowly, I started to see those threads. At dinner the next night, Vanessa mentioned a big closing she was about to secure. She said it casually, like she wanted us to be impressed. But when Chloe asked what neighborhood the house was in, Vanessa dodged the question,
changing the subject to the caterer. Her smile was sweet, but her eyes flicked to Dad in a way that made my skin prickle. Later, Harper called me after one of her late shifts at the paper. "You're right," she said bluntly. No greeting. I ran Vanessa's name through some databases. Nothing solid, but there are connections to a shady LLC with complaints filed for misleading property deals. Not great, my heart sank. So she is a scammer. Looks like it. I'll keep digging. I hung up, my pulse racing. The pieces were still blurry, but one thing was clear. Vanessa was not what she seemed, and Dad, too far gone to notice, was letting her run circles around him. The weight of it pressed down on me. I thought of Chloe and her lace gown, walking down the aisle with hope shining in her eyes, and of Dad stumbling behind her, a liability wrapped in a suit. I thought of Vanessa, whispering in his ear, tightening her grip while my sister's dream day hung in the balance. For Chloe's sake, I had to find a way to stop the storm before it hit shore. But storms don't wait for you to be ready. They arrive, sudden and merciless. And deep down, I knew ours was already on the horizon.
The week before the wedding felt like walking on a tightrope strung over the ocean. Every step I took was careful, deliberate, and laced with the fear of crashing down. Between vendor calls, dress fittings, and Chloe's rising anxiety, I was already stretched thin. But what gnawed at me most wasn't the color of the flowers or whether the chairs matched the linens. It was Vanessa. There's something about intuition, about that gut-deep feeling you can't shake no matter how many times you try to talk yourself out of it. With Vanessa, that feeling was constant. Every time I saw her hand slide possessively onto Dad's arm, every time she smiled too wide or deflected a question, that knot in my stomach tightened. One afternoon, Chloe and I were checking on the bakery for her wedding cake. The place smelt like vanilla and sugar, glass cases filled with pastries that looked almost too perfect to eat. Chloe was chatting with the baker about frosting colors when my phone buzzed. Harper's name flashed on the screen. I stepped outside to answer. "I've got something," she said without preamble, her voice low and urgent. My pulse quickened. "Tell me." She dug deeper into Vanessa's so-called real estate business. Turns out she's linked to a company, an LLC, that's been flagged in multiple states. Shady property deals, sketchy contracts, even a couple of complaints about fraud. Nothing's nailed her yet, but it's enough to raise serious questions. I leaned against the brick wall, heart pounding. "So she's a con artist?" "Looks that way." "And your dad?" "He's listed on one of the accounts." "Transfers, Ava. Big ones. Looks like she's already bleeding him dry." The world tilted around me. I pressed a hand to my forehead, fighting the rush of anger and dread. Dad wasn't just her victim. He was her mark. And he was too drunk, too desperate to see it. "I knew it," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I knew she wasn't right." Harper said softly, "You need to be careful. People like her, they don't play fair. If she feels cornered, she'll lash out." Her words lodged in my chest like glass. Vanessa was already circling our family like a shark, and the wedding was blood in the water. When I went back inside, Chloe's face lit up as she showed me samples of buttercream swirls. "Isn't it perfect?" she asked, her voice filled with the kind of joy I hadn't seen in weeks. I forced a smile, nodding. "Perfect," I echoed, though my mind was far from frosting and flowers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Micah, staring at the ceiling as the waves crashed against the shore outside. My thoughts ran wild. Dad's hollow promises, Vanessa's smug smile, Chloe's fragile hope. Micah stirred, pulling me closer. "You're wide awake," he murmured. "I can't stop thinking about Vanessa. She's up to something. Harper found proof she's running scams. And Dad, he's involved, even if he doesn't realize it." Micah sighed, brushing his hand through my hair. "So, what are you going to do?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know, but I can't let Chloe's wedding become collateral damage." The next day, Harper and I met at the diner again, our usual booth by the window. She slid her laptop toward me, spreadsheets and documents glowing on the screen. "Look," she said, pointing at the records. "See the transfers? That's your dad's account. Thousands of dollars moved into hers. It's all tied to that shady LLC." My chest constricted as I scrolled. Each number felt like a betrayal, like another piece of my father slipping away. "She's
draining him, I whispered. And he's letting her. Harper leaned back, her expression grim. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I looked out the window, the ocean glinting in the distance. Right now, I want to protect Chloe. Whatever Vanessa's doing, whatever Dad's letting happen, it cannot ruin this wedding. Harper studied me, her sharp eyes softening. You've always carried too much, Ava, but you can't control everything. Remember that. I nodded, though the words barely sunk in. Control might be out of my hands, but protecting Chloe, that was non-negotiable. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, the air felt heavy with unspoken tension. Chloe was radiant, even in a simple sundress, her laughter bubbling as she walked through the motions with Nate. Guests smiled, vendors hustled, and for a brief moment, it almost felt normal until Dad and Vanessa arrived. He was already swaying slightly, his tie askew, the faint scent of bourbon trailing behind him. Vanessa was at his side in a blood-red dress, her lips painted to match, her eyes scanning the venue like she owned it. Chloe rushed forward, hugging Dad with the eager joy of a daughter who still wanted to believe. "Daddy!" she squealed, her voice breaking with affection. I hung back, my jaw tight, watching Vanessa's eyes flick across the room, sharp and calculating. Dad slurred, "My little girl, all grown up." His smile was crooked, his eyes glassy, my stomach twisted. He wasn't drunk enough to collapse, but he wasn't sober either. It was the worst kind of middle ground, the kind where trouble always followed. Vanessa looped her arm through his, her gaze landing on me with a smirk. "Let's check out the open bar, hun," she purred, leading him away before I could intervene. I clenched my fists, every instinct screaming to call her out right there, to demand answers, to tear away her mask. But Chloe's smile, her laughter with Nate held me back. I couldn't ruin her night, not yet. Later, as I helped Chloe practice her walk down the aisle, she leaned close, her voice trembling. "Do you think Dad will be okay tomorrow?" I forced the words past the lump in my throat. "He'll be fine, Chloe. It's your day. Nothing will take that from you." But as I watched Vanessa's shark eyes glint under the fairy lights, I knew I was lying. The storm wasn't just near, it was standing in the middle of the room, wearing red and smiling like a predator. The days leading up to the wedding felt like a pressure cooker. Every hour ticked closer to the ceremony, and with it, the weight of everything I'd been carrying seemed to double. Chloe deserved light and joy, but what we had instead was an uneasy mix of hope and dread. Dad's phone calls were the worst. Every night, like clockwork, my phone would buzz and his name would flash across the screen. Each time, I'd debate letting it go to voicemail, but some part of me still picked up, still hoped. "Ava," he slurred one night, the sound of clinking glasses in the background. "Pumpkin, I'm gonna make you proud. I'll walk Chloe down that aisle stone cold sober. You'll see. I can do it." My jaw clenched as I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "You've said that before, Dad. This time's different," he insisted, his words stumbling. "She's my baby girl. I won't mess it up." But I knew the truth. He already was. And then there was Vanessa. Her texts became relentless. She wanted updates on the guest list, the seating chart, even the song selection. "Don't you think Dad should sit at the head table?" one message read. "Are you sure you need that many bridesmaids? Less is more," another chimed in. "I think it'd be better if Nate's family had fewer seats. You don't want it unbalanced, do you?" Each buzz of my phone set my teeth on edge. She wasn't just inserting herself. She was trying to take control. I vented to Harper over coffee, practically stabbing my spoon into a bowl of oatmeal. "She's everywhere, Harper. She's in the guest list, the music, even the table settings. It's like she thinks this is her wedding." Harper leaned back, sipping her latte, her eyes sharp. "That's what manipulators do. They inch their way in until you're too tired to fight back. What's Dad say?" "That she's just trying to help," I muttered bitterly. "But it's not help, it's control. She doesn't care about Chloe's happiness. She cares about the spotlight." Harper raised a brow. "Then take it away from her. Cut her out of the planning." I scoffed, shaking my head. "Easier said than done. You didn't see the look she gave me at the rehearsal dinner, like she was daring me to try." Harper smirked faintly. then maybe it's time you stop playing defense. The idea simmered in my mind all day. I wasn't just Chloe's maid of honor. I was her shield. And if that meant standing up to Vanessa, so be it. Still, no matter how determined I was, the dread lingered. Chloe was starting to feel it too. Her normally bright smile was dimming, her laugh shorter, her shoulders tighter. One afternoon, we sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by half-assembled wedding favors. She was trying to tie tiny ribbons around mason jars of candy, her hands shaking slightly. She dropped one, the ribbon unraveling, and slumped forward. "Ava, what if it all falls apart? What if Dad embarrasses me? What if—" "Stop," I said firmly, reaching across to take her hands. "You've dreamed of this day since we were kids. You deserve it. Dad won't ruin it. Vanessa won't ruin it. I won't let them." Tears welled in her eyes, and she gave me a shaky smile. "You always protect me. You've been doing it since we were little." Her words hit me like a stone in the chest. I had been protecting her for years, from Dad's drunken rages, from broken promises, from the reality she didn't want to face. And now, it felt like that role had reached its peak. But who is protecting me?
That night, as I collapsed into bed beside Micah, I felt the exhaustion in my bones. He pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "You're carrying too much," he murmured. "I don't have a choice," I whispered. "If I let go, everything shatters." His arms tightened around me. "Then let me carry some of it." For a moment, I let myself sink into his steadiness. But when sleep came, it was shallow, fractured by images of Vanessa smirking, Dad stumbling, Chloe crying. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Vanessa. "Don't forget, make sure the open bar is well stocked. Your dad deserves to celebrate properly." That was the breaking point. My fingers shook as I typed back. "This wedding is about Chloe and Nate, not Dad, not you. Stay out of it." 3 dots blinked on the screen, then disappeared. No reply. For the rest of the day, silence. It should have been a relief, but instead it felt like the pause before thunder. When I met Harper later, she noticed the tension in my face. "What happened?" I finally told her off, I admitted. Her lips curled into a satisfied smile. "Good, but watch your back, Ava. People like Vanessa don't take kindly to being pushed aside." The warning lingered with me. And she was right. Vanessa wasn't the type to retreat gracefully. If anything, she'd come back sharper. By the time the final rehearsal was done, I felt like a referee at a game no one else realized was happening. Dad was already testing the limits, stumbling just enough to raise whispers, but never fully collapsing. Vanessa hovered like a shadow, her smile too tight, her gaze too calculating. Chloe was a bundle of nerves, clinging to hope like it was the last branch in a storm. And me, I was caught in the middle, juggling glass, praying it wouldn't all come crashing down. As I walked Chloe to her car that night, she squeezed my hand. "Tomorrow's the big day," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Promise me it'll be okay." I looked at her, my little sister who had carried this dream for so long, and forced a smile. "I promise, Chloe. Nothing's going to ruin it." But as I drove home, the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. The storm wasn't just coming anymore. It was here, and tomorrow it would break wide open. The night of the wedding rehearsal should have been magical. It should have been Chloe glowing in the soft light of the venue, Nate smiling proudly at her side, laughter ringing out as family and friends practiced for the big day. And for a while, it almost was. The beachfront space looked dreamlike under the string lights. White chairs lined the aisle, the ocean behind them shimmering silver under the moon. Chloe's dress swished as she walked through her cues, her cheeks pink with excitement and nerves. Nate squeezed her hand at every chance, grounding her, making her giggle like a schoolgirl. For one fragile moment, I let myself breathe. Maybe, just maybe, this would work out. And then Dad and Vanessa arrived. I knew it the moment I saw them step onto the sand. Dad's tie was already loose, his eyes glassy, his smile too wide. He wasn't stumbling yet, but the faint stagger in his steps gave him away. My throat tightened. "Daddy!" Chloe squealed, rushing toward him like a child, her arms flung around his neck. She wanted so badly for this moment to be right, for him to be the father she needed. For a second,
I almost believed he could be. But then I saw Vanessa. She stood just behind him in another one of her too tight dresses, red tonight, like she was daring everyone to look. Her lips painted a matching crimson, her manicured hand wrapped around Dad's arm like a leash. Her eyes weren't soft or loving, they were scanning, calculating, taking in the venue like she was casing it. My stomach turned. "Look at my girl," Dad slurred proudly, kissing Chloe's cheek. "You're beautiful, baby. Absolutely beautiful." Chloe beamed, tears glistening in her eyes. But when her gaze flicked past him to me, I saw the silent question there. "Is he okay?" I forced a smile, nodding once. But inside, my blood boiled. He was half drunk already. And tomorrow, he was supposed to walk her down the aisle. Vanessa's gaze locked on mine then, and she smiled. It wasn't warm. It was a challenge. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she enjoyed every second of it. "Let's check out the open bar, hun," she purred, tugging Dad away before Chloe could ask anything more. I clenched my fists, biting back the urge to drag her off him and demand she leave. Not tonight. Not with Chloe's joy still fragile and shimmering like glass. Instead, I kept my eyes on my sister. Her smile was shaky now, her laugh a little forced. I slid an arm around her shoulders, whispering, "Don't worry, tomorrow will be perfect." But even as I said it, the lie tasted bitter. The rehearsal continued, though the tension was like static in the air. Dad stumbled through his role, Vanessa hovering close, always whispering something in his ear. Chloe tried to ignore it, but her eyes kept darting toward him, her nerves twisting tighter. At one point, during a pause, Vanessa sidled up to me, her perfume sharp and cloying. "You don't need to worry so much," she murmured, her voice low and syrupy. "Your dad's fine. He's just celebrating a little early." I turned to her slowly, my smile thin. "This isn't about him. It's about Chloe. Don't forget that." Her eyes narrowed, her smile faltering just enough for me to see the steel beneath it. "Of course, but you can't keep controlling everything, Ava. Sometimes you just have to let people be who they are." I leaned closer, my voice sharp. "If who they are ruins Chloe's wedding, I'll hold you responsible." For a moment, her mask cracked, her lips pressed into a hard line, her eyes glinting with something darker. Then, just as quickly, she smiled again, all sugary sweetness. "We'll see," she said softly, before strutting away on her heels. Afterward, as we packed up decorations and smoothed over details, Chloe tried to focus on the positives. She fussed over fairy lights, adjusted ribbons, and practiced her vowels under her breath. But I could see the cracks. Every time Dad laughed too loud, every time Vanessa whispered something in his ear, Chloe's smile faltered. Later, as I walked her to her car, she squeezed my hand. "Do you think Dad will—" She trailed off, unable to finish. I pulled her close, forcing strength into my voice. "He will. Tomorrow's your day. Nothing's going to ruin it." But when I got into my own car, I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles whitened. I couldn't shake Vanessa's words, her smug smile. "You can't keep controlling everything." Maybe she was right, but I would try anyway, for Chloe. That night, I sat on my porch with Micah, the ocean dark and endless beyond us. I told him everything, the look in Vanessa's eyes, Dad's drunken swaying, Chloe's trembling smile. Micah listened quietly, his hand warm over mine. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "Ava, you can't stop the storm, but you can make sure Chloe has shelter from it." I looked at him, frustration and fear twisting inside me. What if that's not enough? What if I can't protect her? He pulled me close, forcing strength into my voice. "Then we face it together. Whatever happens tomorrow, you won't be alone." The waves crashed against the shore, steady and relentless. I closed my eyes, wishing I could believe him completely. But deep down, I knew tomorrow the storm would break, and we'd all be standing in its path. The morning of the wedding dawned brighter than I dared to hope. The North Carolina sun spilled gold across the ocean, the waves glittering like scattered diamonds. The beachfront venue looked like something torn from the pages of a magazine. White tents fluttering in the breeze, rows of chairs lined neatly in the sand, fairy lights twinkling overhead even though it was still morning. For a moment, As I stood barefoot in the sand, clipboard in hand, I let myself believe we might actually pull this off. Chloe was radiant, even in the chaos of hair and makeup, with half a dozen bridesmaids swirling around her. She glowed in a way I'd never seen before. Her lace gown hung delicately from the rack, waiting for her. Her veil draped over the chair like a whisper. She laughed nervously as the stylist pinned her curls, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. "This is really happening," she breathed, gripping my hand when I leaned close. "It's happening," I assured her, squeezing back. "And it's going to be perfect." I wanted those words to be true. For a brief time, as guests began arriving, it almost seemed they were. Nate stood at the altar, his uniform crisp, his face full of steady love. The sound of the ocean was the perfect backdrop. As Chloe stepped onto the aisle, her arm looped through Dad's. My breath caught. For 1 second, he looked like the father we once knew. His suit was pressed, his steps careful, his expression soft with pride. Chloe's smile widened as she walked toward Nate, and tears blurred my vision. Maybe, just maybe, we'd made it through the storm. The ceremony unfolded in a haze of beauty. Vows exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, laughter breaking through tears. When Chloe and Nate kissed, the guests erupted in applause, and the waves themselves seemed to cheer. I stood by my sister, my chest swelling with pride. For that one shining moment, I believed the worst was behind us. But perfection never lasts. The reception was where the cracks began to show. As guests spilled into the tent, music playing, glasses clinking, I scanned the crowd automatically. My eyes found Dad instantly, by the open bar, of course. His tie was already loosened, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He laughed too loudly at something a groomsman said, his steps uneven as he shifted his weight. Beside him, Vanessa stood like a queen surveying her court. Her red dress clung to her, her painted smile sharp as a blade. Her eyes scanned the room, not with joy, but with calculation. She wasn't celebrating. She was studying. Micah slid up beside me, his hand brushing mine. "You okay?" he murmured, his eyes following my gaze. I forced a nod. I have to be. For Chloe. He squeezed my hand, but his frown lingered. As the evening wore on, Dad's laughter grew louder, his story sloppier. He tried to dance, nearly stumbling into a table of candles. Guests exchanged glances, whispers passing like sparks. Chloe's joy began to falter, her glances toward him growing more desperate. Finally, she pulled me aside near the dessert table, her eyes wide and glassy. "Ava," she whispered, her voice trembling, "Dad's making a scene. People are watching. I can't." Her words broke, her throat tight. I hugged her quickly, rubbing her back. "I'll handle it, don't worry." My heart pounded as I made my way toward the bar. Dad was in the middle of a clumsy two-step with one of Nate's uncles, nearly knocking over a tray of champagne. Vanessa clapped her hands, laughing too loudly, egging him on. "Dad," I said firmly, stepping into his space, "let's get some air." He waved me off, his words slurred. "I'm celebrating my girl's big day, Ava. Don't ruin it." Vanessa slid between us like a blade of silk, her smile saccharine. "He's fine, Ava. Let him have fun. It's his daughter's wedding." I squared my shoulders, lowering my voice so Chloe wouldn't hear. "This isn't about fun. This is about Chloe. And right now, he's embarrassing her." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, the sweetness vanishing. "You think you're so perfect," she hissed. "Always meddling, always judging. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, your dad wouldn't need me." Her words were venom, her tone low enough that no one else could hear. My pulse hammered as I stepped closer. "What's your game, Vanessa, huh? What are you after? Because it sure as hell isn't my father's happiness." Her face twisted, the mask slipping. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she spat. Before I could answer, she grabbed a champagne flute from the table, smashed it against the edge, and lunged. Time slowed. The jagged glass glinted under the fairy lights, her hand poised to strike. Guests gasped, screams filling the air. My heart thundered, my body frozen in shock. Then, in a blur, Micah tackled her. The glass skittered across the floor, spinning harmlessly into the sand. Vanessa shrieked as she hit the ground, thrashing as Micah pinned her arms. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed, chairs toppled. Chloe's horrified cry cut through the noise like a knife. Security rushed forward, grabbing Vanessa and hauling her upright. Her face was twisted with fury, her lipstick smeared, her voice hoarse as she shrieked, "You don't understand. He's mine. He's all mine." Police were called, cuffs snapping around her wrists as the crowd gawked. The reception was ruined, the fairy tale shattered, and through it all, Dad stood frozen, glass still in hand, his face pale and slack with shock, or maybe just drunken confusion. I turned toward Chloe, her white dress trembling in the breeze, her face pale as the veil trailing behind her. Tears streaked her cheeks, her lips forming a single, broken word. Ava. Her dream day was gone, ripped apart in front of everyone she loved. And in that moment, as the police dragged Vanessa away and Dad swayed helplessly behind them, I realized something chilling. This was only the beginning.
Chaos doesn't sound like anything you can prepare for. One moment, music and laughter fill the air, and the next, everything splinters into screams, shouts, and the sickening scrape of chairs being shoved aside. That's what it was like in the reception tent. 1 second, Chloe's wedding glowed with warmth and celebration, and the next, Vanessa had turned it into a battlefield. The smashed champagne flute glistened under the fairy lights, jagged edges reflecting terror across every face. I stood frozen, heart pounding, watching Micah hold her back, his arms locked as she thrashed and cursed. Guests gasped, some backing away, others whispering furiously. The sound of someone crying echoed in the background, mingling with the surf pounding the shore. "Get off me!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice raw. "You don't know what's going on. You're all blind." Security rushed forward, 2 men in dark uniforms tackling the situation with practiced calm. They wrenched Vanessa from Micah's grip, dragging her arms behind her back. She fought like a cornered animal, her red dress twisted, her lipstick smeared into a grotesque smile. And then came the police. Someone must have called them immediately, because within minutes, flashing blue lights painted the edges of the beach. Officers stormed into the tent, their presence a wave of finality. Guests craned their necks, whispers rising like smoke. What happened? Who is she? Why did she attack? I looked toward Chloe. My baby sister stood near the head table, her lace gown shimmering like fragile glass under the lights. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. This was supposed to be her fairy tale. Instead, she was standing in the wreckage of a nightmare. I ran to her, pulling her into my arms. She trembled, her body stiff, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Ava, she tried to kill you at my wedding. My wedding!" "I'm okay," I murmured, stroking her hair. "I'm okay. You're safe. That's what matters." But even as I said it, guilt stabbed me. I had promised her a perfect day, and instead, I had brought her a headline. Over my shoulder, I saw Dad. He hadn't moved since it happened, still clutching his whiskey glass like a lifeline. His face was slack, his eyes wide with something between shock and denial. For a flicker of a moment, I thought, maybe he'd run to us. Maybe he'd protect Chloe, protect me, act like the father we always wanted him to be. But he didn't. He just stood there, frozen, useless, as police cuffed the woman he'd let into our lives. Vanessa's screams grew louder as she was dragged toward the exit. "You don't get it. He's mine. He's all mine. He loves me." Her words cracked through the air like lightning. The guests gasped again, whispers rising higher. I turned Chloe's face into my shoulder, shielding her from the sight, but I couldn't shield her from the truth. The rest of the night dissolved into a blur. Guests filtered out, their whispers carrying like poison in the air. Nate tried to hold everything together, thanking people for coming, reassuring Chloe's relatives that everything was fine. But it wasn't. Everyone knew it wasn't. Micah stayed glued to my side, his arm a solid weight around my waist. "She was going to stab you," he whispered once we were outside, his voice low and shaky. "Ava, if I hadn't..."
"You did." I cut him off, my throat tight. "You stopped her. You saved me." But even that truth felt hollow, because the damage had already been done. Chloe sat in the bridal suite, her veil crumpled in her lap, her hands trembling. I knelt beside her, guilt pressing down on me like lead. "I'm so sorry, Chloe. I should have done more. I should have..." She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "It's not your fault. It's hers. It's Dad's. Her voice cracked on the last word, her eyes flashing with something I'd never seen in her before. Anger. For Chloe, anger was rare. She was all forgiveness, all light. But tonight had pushed her too far, and I couldn't blame her. In the days that followed, the wedding became the town's scandal. Small towns thrive on gossip, and ours was no different. The stories spread like wildfire. The drunk father, the unstable girlfriend, the violent outburst at the wedding reception. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, whispers trailing in my wake. Chloe couldn't leave her house without hearing someone murmur about that wedding. She stopped opening gifts, stopped answering calls. The joy she'd built for years had collapsed into ashes. Dad tried to call, leaving voicemails that twisted the knife deeper. "Ava, don't make a big deal out of this," he slurred in one. "Vanessa she got upset. You know how she is." In another, he muttered, "We're family, Pumpkin. Don't turn your back on me now. I need you." Each word made my blood boil. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't acknowledging the danger. He was defending her. One night, he even showed up at my apartment. He reeked of bourbon, his eyes red-rimmed, his shirt wrinkled. "Pumpkin," he pleaded, swaying in the doorway. "Vanessa, she just lost her temper. She didn't mean it." Something inside me snapped. I stood tall, blocking the doorway, my voice like ice. "No, Dad. She tried to kill me at Chloe's wedding, and you're standing here defending her? We're done." Shutting the door on him felt like cutting off a piece of myself, but I couldn't let him drag us down anymore.
Harper wasn't done digging. She showed up at my place one night with a stack of papers, her eyes blazing. "Vanessa's got a rap sheet," she said, spreading the documents across my kitchen table. "Fraud, theft, you name it. And here's the kicker. Your dad's tied to it. Transfers, accounts, thousands gone. He's not just her victim, Ava. He's in on it." My stomach dropped as I stared at the records. Dad's name, his account, his signature. Proof that he wasn't just blind, he was complicit. The betrayal hit harder than any glass shard ever could. I thought of Chloe, her voice trembling as she said she didn't even know him anymore. I thought of Mom, baking cookies in our old kitchen, trying to hold a family together that was already breaking. And I thought of myself, the little girl who swore she wouldn't let his chaos define her. Now, here we were. Chaos defining everything. That night, lying in bed with Micah's arms around me, I couldn't stop replaying the wedding. The shimmer of Chloe's dress, the glow of the fairy lights, the jagged glass in Vanessa's hand. It looped in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. "You're safe now," Micah murmured, kissing my hair. "It's over." But it didn't feel over. Not with Dad still tied to her, not with Chloe broken, not with my family in pieces. And in the pit of my stomach, I knew this wasn't the end of the explosion. It was just the aftershock.
Grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about losing the person you thought someone was, realizing they're gone long before their body ever leaves. That's what it felt like in the weeks after Chloe's wedding. The slow, suffocating grief of watching my father become a stranger. At first, I tried to tell myself he was just blind, that Vanessa had him wrapped so tightly around her finger he couldn't see straight. But Harper's evidence changed that. Those papers she spread across my kitchen table, bank statements, LLC records, complaints of fraud, all tied back to Dad. Transfers with his name on them, thousands of dollars flowing from his account into Vanessa's schemes. He wasn't just her victim, he was helping her. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Vanessa could have done. She was an outsider, a predator circling our family. But Dad, he was supposed to be ours. My father, Chloe's protector, the man who once fixed my bike when I was 8 and carried me on his shoulders at the fair. That man was gone, replaced by someone who would rather cling to a con artist than to his own daughters. I stared at the papers for hours after Harper left, my chest tight, my hands trembling. Every number was like a blade. I thought of Chloe's voice on the night of her wedding, whispering, "I just want one day where we're all happy." And instead, we got a nightmare orchestrated by Dad's choices. How do you forgive that? Telling Chloe was the hardest thing I've ever done. We sat in her kitchen, the air heavy with silence. Wedding gifts still sat unopened in the corner, wrapped in shiny paper that mocked us with their cheer. Chloe looked smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched, her eyes dull from weeks of tears. I laid the papers in front of her, my throat burning. "Chloe, you need to see this." Her hands trembled as she picked up the documents, her eyes scanning line after line. Her lips parted, her breath hitching. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't real." "It is," I said softly, hating myself for being the one to shatter her. Dad knew. He was helping her. He gave her money. He was part of it. Her face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I don't even know him anymore." I reached across the table, gripping her hands tight. "Neither do I." She collapsed against me then, sobbing into my shoulder. I held her, my own tears burning hot. Both of us mourning the same thing, the father we thought we had, the one who never really existed. Dad kept calling, leaving messages, showing up at my door. I stopped answering. But that didn't stop the words. "Ava, you don't get it," he said in one voicemail. His voice slurred. "Vanessa's smart. She's making us money. She's our future." In another, he begged, "Pumpkin, don't shut me out. We're family. I made mistakes, but I'm still your dad." But he wasn't, not anymore. One evening, he banged on my door until I finally opened it. He stood there, swaying, his shirt stained, his eyes bloodshot. He smelled of bourbon and desperation. "Pumpkin," he pleaded, his voice raw. "We can fix this. You, me, Vanessa, we can be a team." Something inside me hardened like stone. "No, Dad, we can't. She tried to kill me at Chloe's wedding, and you stood there and did nothing. Now I find out you've been helping her scam people. You're not my father anymore. You chose her over us." He flinched like I'd slapped him, his mouth opening and closing with no words to fill the gap. For a long moment, he just stood there, the weight of what I'd said hanging between us. Then he turned and stumbled into the night, leaving me shaking in the doorway. Shutting that door felt like severing an artery, necessary, but agonizing. The town's gossip didn't die down, it grew. Articles ran in Harper's paper, outlining Vanessa's schemes, hinting at Dad's involvement. People whispered when I walked into the diner, their eyes full of pity. Some even asked questions outright. "Is it true your dad's in trouble? Was that really his girlfriend who attacked you? Are they going to arrest him too?" I wanted to scream, to tell them to mind their own business, but I just kept walking. The truth was heavy enough without carrying their judgment too. Chloe tried to put on a brave face, but I could see her breaking. She stopped wearing her ring for a while, saying she felt like the vows had been cursed. Nate stayed by her side, patient and gentle, but even his steadiness couldn't erase the pain. One night, she called me in tears. "Ava, I feel like everything I dreamed of is ruined. I look at the pictures and all I see is him, Dad, standing there, drunk, smiling while my world was falling apart." I didn't know what to say. Words felt empty, so I just listened, letting her pour out her heartbreak, letting her know she wasn't alone.
That's when I started therapy. Dr. Ellis was a kind woman with sharp eyes that saw right through me. The first time I sat in her office, I folded my arms, defensive, telling myself I didn't need this. But when she asked, "Ava, what do you feel when you think of your father?" the walls cracked. "I feel betrayed," I admitted, tears stinging my eyes. "I feel like I lost him twice. Once to the bottle, and now to her." Dr. Ellis nodded gently. "You're grieving the father you thought you had. That grief is real, even if he's still alive." Her words cut straight through me. I hadn't thought of it as grief before. I thought of it as anger, rage, disgust. But she was right. It was grief. Shouldn't I just hate him? I asked. She shook her head. "There's no rule book for this. Feel what you feel. Anger, sadness, love, all of it can exist together." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Meanwhile, Harper kept digging, and her findings piled up. Vanessa wasn't just a con artist. She was dangerous. Fraud, theft, manipulation. Her history was littered with it, and Dad had been his willing partner, feeding her money, covering her tracks, maybe even enjoying the illusion of success she dangled in front of him. The case grew, the trial loomed, and the truth became unavoidable. Dad wasn't just broken, he was complicit, and that knowledge, heavy and merciless, changed everything. Late one night, sitting on the porch with Micah, I watched the ocean crash against the shore, relentless as ever. I don't know how to move forward, I admitted quietly. Micah squeezed my hand, one step at a time. You and Chloe, you're stronger than you think. I nodded, but my chest still ached because strength didn't erase betrayal. Strength didn't erase the fact that my father had chosen lies and whiskey over his daughters. And no matter how much I wanted to bury it, the truth would follow us into the months ahead, straight into the courtroom where everything would come to light. The storm wasn't over. It was just shifting, and the next wave was coming fast.
That's when I started therapy. Dr. Ellis was a kind woman with sharp eyes that saw right through me. The first time I sat in her office, I folded my arms, defensive, telling myself I didn't need this. But when she asked, "Ava, what do you feel when you think of your father?" The walls cracked. I feel betrayed, I admitted, tears stinging my eyes. I feel like I lost him twice. Once to the bottle, and the months after the wedding felt like living in the ruins of a storm. The chaos had passed, but everywhere I looked, pieces of our lives were scattered. Memories tainted, trust shattered, dreams buried under debris. Chloe struggled the most. Her wedding day, the day she dreamed of since childhood, had become the stuff of small-town gossip. Every time she went to the grocery store, she felt eyes on her. Every time she tried to look at her wedding photos, she dissolved into tears. For a while, she couldn't even wear her ring, convinced that the vows themselves had been cursed by the violence that marred her day. But Nate never wavered. He held her hand through the whispers, cooked dinner when she couldn't bring herself to move, and reminded her daily that what mattered wasn't the spectacle of a wedding, but the strength of their marriage. Slowly, she began to believe him. I watched her healing with a mix of pride and heartbreak. She'd always been the hopeful one, and even now, in the ashes, she managed to find light. As for me, I leaned on Micah and therapy. Dr. Ellis helped me untangle the twisted knot of emotions inside me. Anger, grief, betrayal, and love, all bound together. She told me one afternoon, "You're mourning the father you thought you had. That grief will take time, but grief doesn't erase your strength." Her words stuck with me. They became my anchor when guilt threatened to pull me under. The trial was the final test. Vanessa sat in the courtroom, her sharp edges dulled by handcuffs and the harsh fluorescent light. She still tried to wear that smug smile, but it cracked as evidence piled against her. Fraudulent contracts, testimonies from victims, bank records that traced her scams across state lines. And then there was Dad. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Slumped in the defendant's chair, his hands shaking, his eyes hollow. The once loud mechanic who used to fill our house with laughter was gone. In his place was a man stripped bare by his own choices. When it was my turn to testify, my palms were slick with sweat, but my voice didn't falter. I spoke about the wedding, about the attack, about the betrayal that cut deeper than the glass Vanessa had tried to drive into me. "That night left scars," I said, my voice echoing in the courtroom. "But it also showed me what I'm made of. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor, and no one, not Vanessa, not even my father, can take that from me." Vanessa glared at me as the judge read the sentence, years in prison. Her screams echoed in the chamber as she was led away in cuffs. Dad didn't scream. He didn't fight, he just sat there, hollow, as if the weight of everything had finally crushed him. He wasn't sentenced to prison, at least not then, but the shame was punishment enough. I didn't feel triumph, I felt release. Life after the trial wasn't suddenly perfect. Healing never is. But slowly, stitch by stitch, we began to sew our lives back together. Chloe and Nate renewed their vows in their backyard, under a canopy of string lights. Just family, just love. Chloe laughed through tears as Nate slipped the ring back on her finger. "Second time's the charm," she joked, her eyes shining. For the first time since the wedding, I saw her glowing again. I landed a big client for my design business, a national campaign that put my work on billboards. When I told Micah, he whooped and pulled me into a hug, spinning me around the room. "I told you, Ava, you're unstoppable," he grinned. And Harper wrote an article about Vanessa's downfall. She didn't name Chloe or me, but the message was clear. Predators like Vanessa only thrive when good people stay silent. It was her way of fighting for me, for us. And Dad, well, he faded into the background of our lives. Calls came less frequently, his voice quieter, more broken. I couldn't bring myself to answer. The grief lingered, but so did the boundary I'd built. Some ties had to be cut to stop the bleeding. 1 month after the trial, we gathered at a beachside restaurant to celebrate survival. Me, Chloe, Nate, Micah, and Harper sat at a long wooden table, the ocean breeze carrying our laughter. Chloe raised her glass, her smile wide. "To Ava," she said, her voice steady. "The strongest person I know. You protected me, even when it cost you everything." I laughed, clinking my glass with hers. "To all of us, for choosing family that fights for each other, even when it's hard." The table erupted in cheers. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not perfect, not healed completely, but lighter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, I realized something important. The storm had left scars. But scars weren't weakness. Scars were proof that we'd survived. Proof that I had fought for something better. For Chloe. For myself. For the life we deserved. And as I looked around that table at the people who mattered most, I knew one thing with certainty. The storm had passed. We were still standing, stronger than before. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about resilience. About finding strength when everything feels broken. If Ava's journey spoke to you, make sure to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because in the end, scars don't define us. They remind us that we survived.